Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. Thank y'all for being here, whether it is afternoon, morning, or evening, wherever you are. Glad to see y'all. I was posting on TikTok letting people know that I was over here talking about this. I decided to go live on YouTube and Facebook because I've had so many people. Hey, Kathleen. I've been on TikTok. Um, so anyhow, like I said, I decided to go live on YouTube and Facebook. That way, this live would be saved and people could watch it a little bit later if they wanted to. Because as you all know, TikTok does not keep its it doesn't keep things up when you go live over there. So I hope that everybody's having a good Tuesday night. It is, and it has been pretty quiet around here. Not much going on. I've been still working on diagrams of the body placements. Oh my gosh, that one's going to kill me. But the information that came out yesterday, or the information that I found out yesterday, I should say, has really been I don't even know what the word is. It seems like every single day something new is coming out about this case. And the fact that it happened 3 years ago, and we are just now starting to receive information is crazy. But that's because of the gag order and the absolute absurdity of the strictness of the gag order. It's stupid. So can't really say a whole lot about it because, what do you do? But anyhow, so yesterday, as some of you know who are watching on TikTok, a couple things were dropped in my lap. And a couple of those things I had been looking into for a while. And it just happened to be that yesterday, everything fell into place for us to find all the documents that absolutely showed that it was all true. So, the information that we received was about Dylan and information about Bethany, two completely separate pieces of info, but damning for both of them nonetheless. And we were able to verify both of these pieces of information with documentation through the document drops that have happened through the law enforcement agencies who have investigated this case. So I think that was the best part of it, even though it took hours to find. And I'm just curious, how many of you saw the live on TikTok last night? If you did, put a 1 in the chat. Interesting. Corey, I can't with you. Oh my God. I can't. Cracking me up over here. If you saw the information from last night, I asked everybody to put a 1 in the chat. Okay. Well, I'm going to go over all of it, and I'm going to show y'all some of the information as well. But to start with, the first thing that I spoke about was Dylan. And it has been rumored since, hey, Elva, it has been rumored since the crime happened that Dylan made a post on Facebook about the crimes and then deleted it almost immediately. Now, that particular post, what it included has been, how is your husband, Kelly? What that particular post included has been a mystery, because there have been different ones that have been floating around the internet, but the validity of those has been in question. And I have always been under the assumption that it was just a fake account that made the post. However, I started looking at the alleged post a couple days ago, and it hit me, especially after Steve Gonsalves put out the information that I don't know why I send out notifications on Patreon and on mine. I just put it in the chats, so maybe everybody will see it. Okay. So as I was saying, the information about Dylan has been sketchy at best. And how many of you have seen the alleged text message floating around over the last 3 years, or the alleged Facebook post? If you've seen it, just say yes in the chat, because it's been all over the place. It's been on Reddit, you name it, 4chan. I mean, they've had it all over the place, alleging that this is the message that was sent. And the reason that I've always doubted it is just because y'all know, in every case I've ever covered, there's always been some dumbass who gets online, makes a post, claims they're either the person that did it or somebody that knows something about it, and puts out information. And I thought that this was the same thing. So I just chalked it up to that. And then they had a press conference and said that people putting out information, false information, was jeopardizing the case. And I thought this is what they were talking about. Well, now that all of these documents have come out, now we see Dylan did put out a Facebook message. And before somebody says, well, it could have been a fake account. Oh, you're right, it could have been. However, the person who reported it to the police was Kaylee Gonsalvez's sister, Olivia. Now, I'm fairly certain that Olivia Gonsalves, especially as vocal as she's been since this happened, would know if the Facebook page that she was reporting was the actual page of the person who lived with her sister. And the message would have been worded a little differently had she thought that it was some people making fake accounts putting out false information, but she didn't. She worded it and said that Dylan Mortensen was making Facebook posts with information about the case. And I'm going to show you that in just a second. Now, I do not believe that this Facebook post that's circulating is real. I don't. And I will tell you why I don't think it's real. Because it doesn't make any sense. And if it doesn't make any sense, there's a reason. It says that they live on the 3rd floor. We know she didn't live on the 3rd floor. I mean, it's just stuff that's not accurate. However, there is information that is accurate. And there's also a couple of things in this Facebook post that are identical to statements that Dylan has made in later interviews that she's given. Let me show y'all this alleged post. All right, this is the alleged post that they said she made. And it says, well, first off, we heard Xana and Ethan come home first and talked to him. They were both drunk, and that's when we went to bed. We live on the 3rd floor and always lock our doors to prevent people from stumbling in our rooms. We're used to noise because it's a party house. We were up late that night and didn't come downstairs until noon when the cops came to investigate. We came downstairs and we saw the bodies bound and gagged, and blood everywhere. So much blood. We didn't make the phone call. We don't know who did. Couple things that are red flags here. Number one, 3rd floor. She didn't live on the 3rd floor. They didn't make the phone call. We know who made the phone call. But at that point, we didn't know who made the phone call. But here's what is interesting about this particular post. These two statements are verbatim something that Dylan said in 2 of her interviews that she did after the fact. We always lock our doors to prevent people from stumbling in our rooms. We're used to noise because it's a party house. She made those two identical statements in two of her interviews later on. We also now know that some of the victims were gagged. We don't know about being tied up or bound, but we do know, because of some of the other documents that have come out, that some of the victims were gagged. So I find it very interesting that this fake account put this information out 5 days after the murders with accurate information. We just found out the information about them being gagged. And the way that we found out that information is from a transcript of a hearing that was done in May. It was a closed, sealed hearing that was done with members of all the families, the prosecution, and the defense. And in that closed hearing, Steve Gonsalves and the crazy Judge Hippler are going at it. Because Hippler's pissed about the Dateline interview that put out information that nobody knew about. And he is basically reaming Steve Gonsalves. And I'm going to show you. Hang on just a second. Maybe I am. All right. So this is the I don't think that the two girls were actually physically involved, but I do believe that they know exactly who did it. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But before I do that, let me show you this about Dylan. Dylan made a Facebook post. This is what autopsy report? It hasn't been released. It's sealed. But there's no doubt in my mind that there was screaming. There was a lot of screaming. These kids were literally butchered. Butchered. The only one that the only one that I do not think may have screamed is Ethan. At least not much. Maybe when they cut the backs of his legs, but once his throat was cut, he didn't scream anymore. Because they pierced his subclavian artery, his subclavian vein, and his jugular at the same time. That would have rendered him speechless. And we know for a fact that, well, not a fact because Dylan's a freaking liar in my opinion, but we know that Dylan has said that Kaylee was screaming that somebody was in the house when she ran down the stairs. So what I'm showing you on the screen is a document from the Moscow PD. And this proves right here, this was on November 18th of 2022. And this shows you that there indeed was a report made to the police by Olivia Gonsalves, who showed them a screenshot of a Facebook post from Dylan Mortensen, where they reported details about the incident. So Dylan did make a post. Olivia Gonsalves is the one who reported it. We just don't know accurately what that post said because it is not included in any of these records that we've seen yet. And I can't find any further mention of this anywhere in any of the documents, which is not unusual because the majority of the tips that they got, they either never followed up on or paid no attention to at all. Something is definitely terribly off, Melanie. I think so, Grits. Not to mention the account that made the post had some of the same friends as the other girls. I'm going to leave this up here so everybody has a chance to see it. No, Lynn. No. Olivia did not report it because she thought it was a fake account. She reported it as being Dylan because there were details about the crime in the post. He didn't do all of this in 13 minutes. It's actually less than 12 minutes. And it certainly doesn't fit the under 12-minute window now that we know that Kaylee Gonsalves' blood is in two different places on the second floor, one of which is almost in the floor by the baseboard of the half wall that looks over into the first floor stairwell. A blood smear with hair in it. That's not cast off. That's not dripping from a weapon, because if it was, it would have had hers and Maddie's blood in it. And Maddie's blood is found nowhere other than on the third floor. But Kaylee's is on the second. We also now know that there is blood in the drain of the shower on the first floor, as well as unknown male DNA and hair. And there's blood in the unoccupied bedroom on the first floor that was used as Kaylee and Maddie's office. But this document right here proves that there was a Facebook post made by Dylan, and Olivia Gonsalves is the person who reported it. Why would Kaylee Gonsalves' sister report to the police that Dylan had made a Facebook post with a screenshot of it to the police when she would absolutely know if it was really Dylan's Facebook? She's Kaylee's sister. Dylan's Kaylee's roommate. Of course she would know if it was really her Facebook or not. And do you see one thing in this that says Olivia Gonsalves reported fake accounts were putting out details of the crime on Facebook pretending to be Dylan Mortensen? No. It says Olivia Gonsalves showed a screenshot of a Facebook post from Dylan Mortensen. Has everybody seen it? Lynn, that's my personal theory as well. I think that somebody was hiding in the, or waiting, I should say, in that first floor bedroom. And I think that their change of clothes and everything else was in there as well. And, I've questioned why they tore that house down too. But after I did some research with some of the new documents that came out at the first of the month, I think I understand why they tore the house down more so now than I did before. Because with blood and bodily fluids, it becomes toxic and a hazard, a biohazard, which is exactly why they have to wear hazmat suits in order to remove it. And the electricity had been turned off in the house. So it was just growing toxicity. And in order for the people who owned it to be able to make it habitable again, they were going to have to spend a huge amount of money basically ripping it down to the bare bones and rebuilding it to get all of that out. And if I had been the person that owned that house, I wouldn't have wanted to do that. Put all of that money in there and then try to rent the house out to somebody else when it's just going to be basically a place for people to come and bother the tenants because it's the place where the crime happened. Would have been a constant stream of people there. And if I had owned that house outright and could have afforded to donate it to the college, I would have done it too to get it off my hands. The Watts house should have been taken down. I don't think tearing the house down hid evidence because both the prosecution and the defense agreed to them tearing the house down because they both said that they had all of the information and any evidence that they needed out of that house. Both sides signed off on the house being torn down. I don't think that it was because of hiding evidence. Well, and that's what I said, Alexis. I think the Watts house should have been torn down. Now, let me show you what Steve Gonsalves said about the All right. I'm going to tell you, I don't even know at this point if I believe that Brian Kohberger was even involved in the actual unaliving, especially with the absolute brutality of the crime. All right, so here is part of this, and what I'm showing you is this right here, this part. And it's Steve Gonsalves, and this is where he's arguing with Judge Hippler in this closed sealed hearing that now has been unsealed. Steve Gonsalves says, the facts are that we don't have to have this gag order. That's the facts. We do not have to have a gag order. I think it's disgusting that we are even saying the word gag when some of the victims were gagged. I think it's disgusting that we are asked to hide what happened to our children. I don't agree with it. Right here, Steve Gonsalves, in a hearing with all of the other families, the prosecution and the defense, and Judge Hippler, says some of the victims were gagged and that they have been asked to hide what happened to their children. There's no denying this. This has been a rumor until now. This is right here in black and white in a court document. And in this same court document, not one person, especially this very vocal judge who's literally going at Steve Gonsalves, corrects him and says none of the victims were gagged. Instead, Judge Hippler says, I don't care if you agree with it or not, sir. I also don't have to have a trial if I can't seat a jury. And then he goes on to say to Steve Gonsalves, this that Steve repeated in an interview with Nancy Grace in September. Steve says, I understand you have a job to do, and so do I as a parent. These are my children. I care what happened to them. And the judge says, your talking right now is not going to bring your child back. And it potentially endangers the ability to hold the person you have indicated that you believe is accountable to account for this. Lyndon, I don't talk about this much publicly, and I do most of my talking about my opinions on Patreon for a reason. I would not contact Brian Koberger for those same reasons, because I 1000% believe that this case is dangerous. In all honesty, me talking about it right now is dangerous. Which is exactly why Brian Koberger hasn't said a damn word, and he won't. Melanie, I don't know how he got involved in it, but I have my suspicions. And I haven't even talked about this on Patreon. yet. But knowing now that this case was classified through the FBI as extortion, not a murder, literally classified as extortion. That is the official classification by the FBI for this case. I don't know how people can't be questioning the same things I'm questioning. I don't understand it. I don't understand how anybody thinks that this case is solved. I don't understand how anybody thinks that this is tied up with a bow because Brian Kohberger is in prison. I don't understand how anybody believes that Brian Kohberger did this in under 12 minutes alone, especially with all of the information that we are currently receiving about the significance and severity of the injuries that they received. Kaylee Gonsalves was stabbed 21 times in the face and head, mouth. Her parents did not even get a copy of her autopsy report until the day of the sentencing. Didn't feel anything. They just died. And now we know that they were all awake. Well, death by baby. Listen, everybody is in. Everybody is entitled to their opinion. Candace, I've looked up Steve Gonsalves. I don't know why I'm glitching. But I want to give y'all some food for thought. And I say this all the time on TikTok, and I'm going to give it here. I did a deep dive on Steve Gonsalves when this case first happened. I did a deep dive on all the parents. And I'm going to give y'all some facts really quickly, especially those of you who haven't listened. Is there anybody here who's not listened to me talk about this before? If you're here for the first time, because put a 1 in the chat. I'm just curious. Hopefully not, so I don't have to go over everything. Okay, so there's some of y'all. All right. So here's some facts and some food for thought for those of you who haven't followed this case, who don't know as much about it. Number one, at the time that these crimes happened, Xana's mother was on the run from the police for drug charges. And she did an interview with News Nation in a car, obviously high as a kite. And at that time, Ann Taylor was her attorney of record. Ann Taylor had to resign as Xana Kernodle's mother's attorney in order to represent Brian Kohberger. Maddie's father and stepmother were also CIs and turned state's evidence against drug dealers for plea deals in charges that they received for drugs. In March of this year, there was a special prosecutor who was appointed to this case by the governor of Idaho. He is a former federal prosecutor with the Biden administration who resigned in February when Trump took office and was assigned to this case in March. Now, typically speaking, and I challenge any of you to find anything differently, when a special prosecutor is assigned to a case, it is because they have an area of expertise that helps in the litigation of whatever case it is that they're being appointed to. Joshua Hurwitz is the special prosecutor's name who was appointed to this case. And his two areas of expertise, the first one is financial COVID fraud. The second area of expertise is the fact that he helped to prosecute and convict 10 members of the Aryan Night cartel. I've said since the beginning when I first started covering this case that I felt like these deaths were a message. I didn't know to who, I didn't know what, but a message to somebody. I've also said since the beginning that I thought that the exact people who were meant to die died. I've just been on the fence about Kaylee Gonsalves because I was under the impression that she was collateral damage until recently. And now my opinion is that she was the main target, but the others were also targets. We know now from listening to some of the statements and interviews that have been done by friends of the victims that Kaylee was dating a detective with the Moscow PD, a married detective. I don't know that you'd call it dating, but the friend did confirm that they were having sexual relations. And it has been rumored that this particular detective was an undercover narcotics officer. Well, of course, he would have connections to the defense team. Here's some other things that we know for a fact. Dylan's boyfriend, Quinn, his father, is connected to the Aryan Night cartel. Quinn has multiple charges for drugs. I've also said from the beginning that I believe that whoever did this had tactical experience. They were able to get in and out, do this in a manner that left as little evidence behind as possible. They knew exactly what they were doing. So much so that they were able to inflict a kill shot, which is what that strike to the subclavian artery is called, a kill shot to two different individuals in the midst of fighting with them. A strike to the subclavian artery is something that even seasoned medical personnel can't do without using digital imagery. But whoever did this was able to hit two people's subclavian artery with one strike while they were wrestling and fighting. And people really believe that some man who has just studied criminal justice was able to do that? A man who literally looks like I could blow him down with a hot breath? These victims were stabbed over 100 times. Over 100 times between the four of them. And all four of them fought back. All four of them had defensive wounds, including Ethan, who's 6'3" and over 200 pounds. Whoever did this stabbed Xana so hard in the top of her head that it shattered her skull in multiple places. That's some serious force. For a stab wound to shatter your skull? Kaylee Gonsalves was unrecognizable. Her face was beaten so badly, her teeth were broken out, some of her teeth were gone. Her mouth was cut in multiple places. She had 2 subdural hematomas, which are brain bleeds. They suffered greatly. She had foam coming out of her mouth when she was found, which is typical because her lung was punctured. But what that means is that her lungs were still moving when she died. She was still alive and she was still trying to breathe when her lung was punctured. That's why the white fluid was coming out of her mouth. Read what you just wrote. During his youth. I don't underestimate anybody. There's no way one person did it. There's no way. And here's the thing about it, and this is one thing that I don't understand at all. How anybody with any modicum of intelligence who claims that Brian Koberger was so smart and he pulled this off and he planned this and he did this and he did that. How do you think, how can you say that? But then how do you justify or explain the fact that he is literally speeding all through that neighborhood, being caught on surveillance camera after surveillance camera for over an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth? Do y'all think that he was stupid enough to not know that he was being caught on surveillance camera? Janessa, that's what I'm saying. Not only that, now that we know that these victims are supposed to be gagged, some of them anyhow, and this crime, according to the prosecution, was supposed to be done in under 12 minutes. 12 minutes is the time frame from when he was seen, or his alleged vehicle was seen, doing a 3-point turn on King Road to the time his vehicle is seen speeding around the stop sign at the end of King Road. Under 12 minutes to get into a house, unalive 4 people, gag them, sit down in a chair, take a shower, clean up, and not leave one single piece of DNA. Not one. Not a hair, not a fiber, not a drop of blood, not a drop of sweat, even though he would have been sweating like a whore in church after fighting off all 4 of these victims. Not one. And that's not speculation. That is an actual fact that is in court documents. The only thing that places Brian Koberger at the scene of this crime is touch DNA on the button flap of a knife sheath. Touch DNA. His DNA is not anywhere else on it, even though there is a mixture of DNA on the outside of it that includes both Maddie and Kaylee's and an unknown male that excludes Brian Kohberger. Brian Kohberger's isn't found on it, though. And the knife sheath just happens to be laying beside Maddie's body, but there's no blood on it. No blood. Minuscule drops of blood that you can barely see. Hey, Kim. How did that get there, though, if he hadn't been in the house? The sheath doesn't place him at the scene. If you saw my search history on my computer, that's correct, Breezy. I didn't say that I think he's not guilty. I do think he's involved. I just do not believe and never will that this man did this all on his own. I'm not even certain at this point that he committed the unalivings. I think it is more likely, and I think that he is more likely to have been the cleanup person than anything else. He had severe OCD, wore gloves everywhere. There's literally proof in the court documents that there were signs of a cleanup. Literal proof. And a sheath does not put you at the scene of a crime. He could have touched that sheath anywhere at any time, and somebody else could have taken it in that house. Just because your DNA is on an object does not put you at the scene of a crime, but blood evidence does. And there's blood evidence on the handrail going down to the first floor that belongs to unknown male B, who is connected to a group of 4 biological brothers that the Moscow PD and the Idaho State Police were investigating. They literally contacted one of the brothers, asked them to voluntarily submit DNA so that they could check it against it. That brother denied, said, "No, I'm not. Do not contact me again." And then the FBI tells them, don't do any more research. Don't do any more investigation into these 4 brothers. Send all of it to us. That was on December 10th. On December 15th, Brent Kopaka died in a standoff with the police. And then on December 19th, the evening of, the FBI calls Moscow PD and gives them Brian Kohberger's name. Over a month after the murders, the FBI gives them Brian Kohberger's name and tells them they got it from a tip. His phone does not prove that it was him driving around the house. No. His phone was off. As a matter of fact, Breezy, let's talk about the time, the phone information. The defense had an expert witness. Cy Ray, look him up, S-Y-R-A-Y, who is literally renowned in his field. He has trained the majority of the law enforcement agencies in this country on how to read and interpret phone data. He has testified at thousands of trials, both at the federal and state level, but never until this case has he ever volunteered to be a witness for the defense. He did so because he says that the prosecution is withholding 7 minutes of phone data that could exonerate Bryan Kohberger. 7 minutes of phone data, the exact 7 minutes that it would have taken him to get from his apartment to the house. And he says he can prove with evidence that Bryan Kohberger was nowhere near that house at the time they claim these unalivings happened. The judge threw his testimony out and called him a conspiracy theorist and literally berated Ann Taylor in the courtroom for having him as a witness. Called a man who is literally one of the most renowned experts in phone data in the world a conspiracy theorist. The same judge who told Steve Gonsalves that talking about it wasn't going to bring his child back. He did. And then we have 3 separate individuals. I'm only going to name 2 of them. Brent Kopaka, who worked at the University of Washington, where Bryan Kohberger worked and went to school, and also lived within very close proximity to Bryan Kohberger. He also drove the exact vehicle that Bryan Kohberger drove, a white Elantra. Brent Kopaka was former military, tactically trained, paratrooper. And on the 15th of December, he was involved in a standoff with the police, which led to his death. There was 0 evidence in Bryan Kohberger's apartment. No blood, nothing. No DNA, no hairs, no fibers, nothing. There was 0 evidence in Bryan Kohberger's vehicle. No blood, no hairs, no fibers, nothing. There was not 1 drop of blood outside the house, not 1 footprint leading in the direction of where they say his car was parked. Nothing. And I have always, and those of you who have followed me and have listened to me talk about this before know that I've always questioned the fact that the body placements, both Ethan's and Kaylee's, because Kaylee was beaten almost unrecognizably, yet she was the person that was closest to the wall. And her and Maddie were found laying on their backs side by side in a single bed with Kaylee next to the wall. And people, y'all really believe that this man leaned over Maddie's body and was beating Kaylee? Wearing this mask that Dylan claims he was wearing, which would have left part of his face uncovered. That in that close of proximity to Kaylee. And you don't think his face would have been scratched at all? You don't think he would have dropped sweat, blood, spit, hair, skin on Maddie's body, on Kaylee's body, on the bed covers? Because that altercation was brutal. And you really believe that that is possible? He was literally face to face with all of the victims, because this was hand to hand, sharp force injuries. And you don't think that he left any epithelial cells, not a drop of blood, not anything on any of the victims? I challenge you to find a crime similar to this that the assailant didn't leave anything behind. And now we know, and my suspicions were confirmed, that Kaylee was on the second floor. It was Kaylee that ran down the stairs. Kaylee was in the hallway going to Xana's bedroom. And we know that because her blood is smeared at the bottom of the wall. And there was hair in the blood, which definitely implies that she was being hurt in the hallway. So how did she end up back upstairs in the bed next to Maddie? Jeff, I agree with you that you can stab somebody and they can be slumped over. And Kaylee, I absolutely, and Ethan, you can see the arterial spray on the wall next to Ethan. My problem is what happened before. Kaylee was beaten the way that she was beaten before the subclavian artery strike happened. That's why they're called kill shots. I covered that case. It's actually on here on this channel. Subclavian artery strikes literally are called kill shots for a reason. Because it's meant to inflict maximum damage. And it is a wound that you are not coming back from. And thinking about Irina just pisses me off even more every time I think, getting me back thinking about that case, because that makes me madder than a wet setting hen. But this is a picture of the knife sheath. I'm going to zoom in. Look at how minuscule the drops of blood are. I agree with you on that too, Jeff. I actually have two of the exact same one that they claim was used. I have an arsenal and I collect sharp force weapons. And I have two of the identical K-bars. One was gifted to me and one I purchased myself. And they are used as lots of things. That's why they're called tactical weapons, survival weapons, because you can use them for multiple different uses. They have a lot of different purposes. Can y'all see these blood spatters? Or blood droplets, I should say. How minuscule they are. And to me, what these blood droplets look like, and this is just my personal opinion, of course, I am no expert in anything, but it looks like where blood has aspirated, like where somebody was taking their last breaths and blood was aspirating from their mouth. That's why these drops of blood are so tiny. Nothing else makes any sense to me. Because any other blood droplets would be much larger. Cast off would be larger. Arterial spray would be larger. Thank you, Wine Mama. Now, look at the back of it. This is the back of the knife. Not one, I mean, literally, there's nothing. There is a teensy tiny drop right there. A teensy tiny drop right there. Right there. I mean, seriously? This was laying next to the bodies. Well, Jeff, anything is possible, but I mean, at this point, there's no proof of that. There's no proof that Brian Koberger was ever even in this house. Touch DNA does not put you in the location of a crime. Blood does. Jeff, it was actually not found under her leg. It was found underneath the comforter. But the comforter has no holes in it. Not one hole was in that comforter. The comforter was put over them after the fact, and the blood seeped through. Same thing with Ethan. He was covered up to his waist with a blanket, but there are no stab wounds on it, and there are multiple stab wounds to his legs. They were covered up after the fact. Question is, by who? Not only is that a question, but who shut Maddie's door? Because Dylan says that when she ran downstairs to Bethany's bedroom, she could see Xana in the floor. And Jeff, I don't think it is a coincidence, but there's no proof that it's his vehicle. The expert witness for the prosecution literally says in his affidavit that he cannot, with any degree of certainty, say that that vehicle is Brian Koberger's. The only thing that he can say is that it is his opinion that the vehicle in the video footage matches the description of the same type of vehicle. But there are no identifying factors such as dents, dings, bumper stickers on the vehicle that can positively identify it as Koberger's, nor do you ever see Koberger entering, exiting, or driving the vehicle. There were no words carved on Ethan's legs. That was a rumor. Ethan's legs had 2 long gashes on the backs of his legs down into the muscle almost to the bone on the back of both legs. However, he was found laying on his back. I'm getting to that, Green Eyes. Let me pull that document up real quick. Oh, let's see. April 24th, 25th. All right, right here. This is in, Jeff, I'll tell you exactly why Jeff, it's not a coincidence, but if you look at the totality of the evidence, there's nothing. And Dylan literally is a liar. If you have not listened to all of her interviews, you need to, because she contradicts herself multiple times. Multiple times. The most recent contradiction is of when they made the 911 call, because she tells Emily that neither Xana nor Ethan are responsive. And at that point, she's supposed to not even know that Ethan is in the bedroom. Then later tells the officer that she doesn't know if Ethan's in the house after she's already told Emily that he was unresponsive. And I personally believe that he took a plea deal because he knew that there was no way he was ever going to get a fair trial. The judge threw out every single thing that could possibly help in his defense, and he knew that the jury wasn't going to get to hear anything other than the bits and pieces that they wanted them to. But he knew that if he took a plea deal, that all of the information and discovery would be released to the public, which is exactly what's happened. And now we know so much. Jeff, she described exactly how she was laying, in what direction, and what she was wearing. That's a little bit more than a glimpse. As well as she shouldn't have been able to even catch a glimpse of her because the door was closed the next morning, according to her and Hunter. No reason for him to take a plea deal if he didn't do it? Jeff, have you heard of the West Memphis 3 or the Central Park 5? People take plea deals every single day for crimes they didn't commit, and I know that personally. Goodness gracious. Partially open. But this is Hunter's exact words. When he got to the door, he could not see inside. He had to push the door open in order to see Xana's body. It is physically impossible for Dylan to have been able to see Xana's body from the living room if Hunter couldn't see her body from the threshold of the door. So who closed the door after Dylan went downstairs? Whose blood is in the drain on the first floor, and whose DNA is down there? Whose blood is in the bedroom on the first floor? Why is Kaylee Gonsalves' DNA at the bottom of the half wall on the second floor? And why is her blood on the table with the beer pong set up? Why does Brian Koberger not have one scratch, not one bruise, no wounds at all, even though Dylan claims that the mask he was wearing left half of his face uncovered? When all 4 victims had defensive wounds, which means they were fighting back. I have the picture of Dylan and her boyfriend. It was actually 2 months prior to this happened. And I also have a picture of Dylan holding a K-bar. Lots of people gave DNA. This is directly from the state of Idaho's website. This is a court document. that was filed on April 24th. Exactly, She Booty. People want to say that he was so smart that he planned all of this stuff, yet he made some of the stupidest mistakes that anybody in the world could have made. There are multiple posts of Dylan with a K-bar, Jeff. Multiple. I have both of those pictures of her in the car, too. I'll have to find the real one. Let me get this pulled up. This is directly from a document that was filed on April 24th, and it is the document's name, if anybody wants to look it up, is the Order on Defendant's Motion in Limine in reference to vague and undisclosed expert testimony. This is Darren Gilbertson, Darren Gilbertson, Jesus, take the wheel. I can't even talk. This says, defendant disclosed expert opinions from Brent Turvey that more than one assailant was necessary to accomplish the crime in the time frame alleged. Specifically, he asserts that, number one, there is direct and indirect evidence that attempts were made by the suspects to clean up the crime scene after the homicides, which would have taken far longer than the time interval alleged by the state. And two, there were multiple weapons used against Kaylee, and Xana and Ethan appeared to have been attacked at the same time. Well, Shadow Dancer, there is a video out of the show that Dylan claims they were watching that night, Vampire Diaries, and there's an episode where those exact words are said by the character in the show. Law enforcement did not test all of the blood evidence. Guess what? The judge denied this testimony. The judge denied Brent Turvey being able to testify at the trial. That judge literally took every single thing that they could possibly have used to give him a fair trial and threw it out the window. And why have they for 3 years led us to believe that the victims were asleep? Because now we know they weren't. So the last piece of information that I want to tell you about is something that I found out yesterday. And I'm going to leave y'all with this. We've known for quite some time that there was a document filed by Ann Taylor for Brian Kohberger that alleged that Bethany was withholding exculpatory evidence that would exonerate Bryan Kohberger. Bethany has not been back to the state of Idaho since the crimes happened. She didn't even go back for the funeral. She didn't go back for the witness statement. She went back for nothing. And her mother says she will never return to that state. We also know that back at the time that this happened, Bethany made a statement that she heard water running. We now know that there was blood found in the drain of the shower on the floor that she lives on, which is literally feet from her bedroom. Blood in the drain, unknown male DNA, and hair in the drain as well. Yesterday, I was able to get a screenshot of a sealed affidavit by a private investigator that the defense hired. And I'm not going to put it up here because you can't see it. You're not going to really be able to see it on the screen. But in that affidavit, the man's name who is in there talking says that Bethany came home 8 hours later and found the bodies. And that Bethany saw a man partially dressed leaving the house who was not Bryan Kohberger. And that is what the rumor has been this entire time. That rumor has been circulating since this happened, that Bethany saw another man holding a trash bag leaving the house. Now we know that somebody took a shower downstairs in that bathroom. But the question is, if Bethany saw him, why didn't Dylan? Where was Dylan? And I know that Ann Taylor's not going to risk her reputation and her career by filing a document that she doesn't have proof of. She literally filed a document in the courts of Idaho accusing Bethany of withholding exculpatory evidence that would exonerate Bryan Kohberger. There was also blood found in the bedroom on the bottom floor. Which would make sense if the person went in that bedroom to grab whatever they were going to change into. So yesterday when I saw this affidavit, because y'all know I don't believe everything that I hear, and I implore you not to either. Don't believe anything anybody says. Do your own research and find out for yourself if the people that you're listening to are telling you the truth, because that's exactly what I did yesterday. And thankfully, my mama was there to help me. But we were able to corroborate the fact that the man who was in this affidavit and made these claims is a witness for the defense. And he is on the list of witnesses that the defense filed for trial. Bree, it's amazing to me because yesterday the Gonsalves family made a post saying that they still believe Brian Koberger was the one and only assailant, and they believe that, and they were in full support of both of the survivors. Here's another little food for thought for you before I go. There were members of the Aryan Night Cartel at both Brent Kopaka's funeral and Mowich's funeral. And I do believe that all of the families know who did it. But this is the one thing, well, there's several things that about this situation that do not sit well with me. Stacy Chapin told her two remaining triplets to tell people that they're twins. The Chapins have also heavily invested into Othram Laboratories. Othram Laboratories is the DNA laboratory that processed all of the DNA from the crime scenes. And I've actually made a statement before that the Chapin family had been the most quiet of them. Then I found out that Stacy Chapin was literally giving lectures at CrimeCon. With the owners of Othram Laboratories. Yes, Desi, it is. That comment that she made about telling people that you're a twin, I don't understand at all. I don't understand what she meant when she said that 2 a.m. was the darkest hour. And I don't understand what Steve Gonsalves meant when he said that he didn't have to go upstairs. Thank you, Pixie. And contrary to some people's belief, I don't just read news articles. I'm literally reading nothing. Bonnie, I agree with you that I think they know what happened. I don't think he would have gotten not guilty because they wouldn't have presented all the evidence. And I've said this a couple times the last few days because of this debacle that is going on with the repayment of the restitution. Um, It would be very smart of Brian Koberger to refuse to pay the restitution at this point because so much of the information has come out. And I will tell you, I have seen a huge shift in people's opinions since all of these documents have come out. Huge. Before, I got a lot of shit by saying that I didn't believe that he was the only person that did this, but it has become more and more common for people to agree that they don't think so either with all of this new evidence. And I do believe it would be very smart of him to refuse to pay restitution because that would invalidate his plea deal, which would then make the judge have to take this case to trial. And the prosecution will be forced at this point to present all of the evidence that they had because it's been made public. They wouldn't be able to pick and choose the specific things that they wanted to show to the jury. A lot of people who were saying I was wrong are now singing a different tune. That happens with every case. No, Bree, so one of the conditions of his plea agreement was that he had to pay a certain amount of restitution. And now he's refusing to do so because of the significant amounts of the GoFundMes that the families received. Because the restitution is supposed to make them whole and cover any damages from the funerals. Yet they all received huge GoFundMes that would have covered all of the expenses. And he's saying that those expenses have already been covered. The families aren't out any money. He shouldn't still owe restitution. But by him refusing to pay that, if the judge rules against him, that would invalidate his plea. And it would then have to go back to trial, and he would be up against the death penalty again. And I said, if y'all will remember, that the only reason I could think, other than threats, that he would have taken a plea deal would be so that all of this information was put out to the public, because he knew that if it went to trial, bits and pieces are all that was going to be shown, and it wouldn't be fair, and that he was going to be ultimately facing a firing squad. Yes, Bree, exactly. And I will say this, and I'm saying this to anybody who's listening right now. Don't look at this case, or any case for that matter, through your emotions or through an emotional lens. You can't put your own personal feelings and emotions onto a case if you're covering it or if you're looking at it. I look at things from a completely objective point of view, and I never use emotional thinking. You can't. If you do, you're never going to have an accurate opinion about anything. That's why I don't watch other people's content on cases that I'm covering. It clouds your judgment. You have to look at the facts, and you have to look at the evidence, and you have to look at the totality of circumstances. And if you do that with this case and use critical thinking skills, how anyone can come to the conclusion that Brian Koberger did this by himself in under 12 minutes, I will never understand, because it's impossible. And I'm going to leave y'all with one last thing before I go, because I've got to go live on TikTok. Now, again, these are not accurate. These are approximate. and I do have to make these are diagrams that I made of the wounds that have been described through the documents that have been released. No, it wasn't debunked, Kristen. And I want you to think about this too. These are Ethan and Xana's injuries, approximate injuries. If Kaylee Gonsalves was running down the stairs screaming and Dylan heard her, why didn't Bethany? Why didn't Ethan and Xana come running? I don't care how drunk you are. If you hear somebody screaming like that, saying somebody's in the house and running down the stairs towards you, you're going to jump up and see what's going on. Why didn't they? Because in my personal opinion, they were already dead. Now, two of the wounds that are missing on Ethan are the two long gash wounds on the backs of both of his legs. I didn't put them on here yet, Tally, because I didn't have accurate descriptions of them, but I do now, so I can put them back on there. I only put the injuries on here that I had accurate descriptions of because I didn't want to inaccurately portray where the wounds were. There are some wounds that I don't have on here because I don't know exactly where they were inflicted. The lung punctures, the heart punctures, the liver punctures. You know, we've been led to believe that he was asleep and the only thing that he had was a stab to the throat, and that's not true. He had multiple defensive wounds. He had wounds to his head. Now, let me also clarify. Every dot you see is a stab wound. Both Ethan and Xana only had sharp force injuries, which are stab wounds. I think they were all attacked at the same time by different people. And I also believe that Kaylee was running downstairs toward Ethan because she thought he could protect her and had no idea what was happening. And these are Maddie and Kaylee's injuries. Thank you, Green Eyes. No, Tasha. The only one that I think possibly could have been done by a female is Maddie's, Roxanne. The others, way too brutal. Thank you, Melanie. At the end of the day, y'all, this is about justice for the four of them. And I made these diagrams because it's very hard for people, especially people who are visual thinkers, to be able to picture in their heads the wounds. It's one thing when you hear somebody read out what they are, but it's completely different when you actually see them and how they were inflicted on a body. This gives you a much bigger picture of the brutality of what happened to them. And when I said they were butchered, I meant it. They were. Xana especially. Xana fought till her last breath. And I do not think that justice has been served. I don't think it's going to be until all of the information is put out there. This is what these individuals went through, yet two of the people that live in the same house were not even approached, not touched, not even approached. Neither Bethany nor Dylan, who claims to have come eyeball to eyeball with the assailant, was not even approached. And the other four occupants in this house were butchered. Two of them less than 20 feet from Dylan's location, and her door was unlocked. Well, Mrs. Newsom, they do if they're also connected. Thank you so much to those of you who sent cash apps and PayPals. I appreciate y'all very much. This case has literally blown me away since it happened. And the more information that comes out, the crazier it is. And every time I think that I have my mind somewhat wrapped around it, here we go again, and I don't. Exactly, Summer. Well, I'll tell you, Roxanne, I'm not even sure at this point that I believe that Bethany and Dylan were at the house when all of this happened. I mean, how do you explain the fact that the dog had been there all night and every door in the house is open when the police get there, including the door to Kaylee's room? The dog is in the middle of Kaylee's bed. Kaylee and Maddie's bodies are less than 20 feet from them, covered in blood, and the dog is in Kaylee's bed, but there's not a drop of blood on its fur nor its paws. That dog is supposed to have been inside that house for over 8 hours without having gone out to the bathroom, but there's no accidents anywhere. Well, graveyard hex, they couldn't say that they weren't there because people knew they were there. That doesn't even take into account the cleanliness of the floors on the second and third floor as opposed to the bottom floor. The bottom floor looks like a hog's waller all over it. Those stairs look like they hadn't been cleaned since Moby Dick was a minnow, yet the floor on the second and third floor you could eat off of. All right, y'all. Oh, no, no, no. No, graveyard hex. This case will drive you absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. All right, y'all. I'm going to get off of here, get something to eat, and then I am going over to TikTok to talk about this some more and to do battles. So thank you, everybody, for watching. I appreciate y'all. Y'all make sure to share it out. Don't forget to like it, and I will see y'all soon. Also, I'm going to start doing live streams on YouTube and Facebook about cases as well as on TikTok. I'm going to try to stream twice a day, once on TikTok and once on YouTube and Facebook. We're going to see how it goes. So I will see y'all soon. Bye, everybody.